Iguodala to Curry, back to Iguodala, up for the layup. Oh, blocked by James. It's over. It's over. Cleveland is a city of champions once again. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.
That sound means it's time for Cavs on the Break NBA podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. I'm your host, Chase Smith, and with me today, a very special guest, host of the Titus and Tate Show, the leading college basketball podcast on the planet. Some people call him the Michael Corleone of podcasting. Anyone ever call you that, Tate?
Not quite, but I'll take it. Yes, better than Fredo, I think. Yeah.
Friend of the program, Tate Frazier. Tate, man, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, man. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate you reaching out. I always say yes to anyone that wants to have me on to act like I'm an analyst or an expert because look, this is all fun and I love talking about basketball and I love basketball. So it's good to be here and I'm happy to answer any questions and I apologize in advance if I let anybody down with this.
No, man, no, we're going to have fun. Let's touch on a couple things. You and Titus have a little podcast that is pretty widely known, and you talked about dropping the bag first.
Yes.
College athletes. Tate, last week, is it the ruling that will change college sports forever, or how will it change? Let's talk about that a few moments.
Yeah. The NIL, for the people at home that did not see this, name, image, likeness. This is what, the O'Bannon brothers, Ed O'Bannon specifically, was fighting over when NCAA basketball was being made. And he watched himself on the screen and said, wait a second, that's me. And I am making no money from that. And I think the full circle moment for everybody is that they realize when you signed your LOI, your letter of intent, that you actually signed over your NIL rights to that school. They own you, they own your image, they own your likeness, and they're going to, profit off of it. And they've done that for years upon years upon years. And Jay Billis has yelled, about these things. It's wrong is his catchphrase. We always joke about that on Titus and Tate. But for me and for Titus, we already knew that the bag was being dropped for most recruits. You can be around top flight recruits. And unfortunately, it was done in very shady ways. And very unfortunately was, James Michael McAdoo, for example. I went to school. We're the same age, North Carolina. My parents couldn't even take him out to dinner because that would be a recruiting violation. And then people would say he's ineligible to play. So it was a very convoluted, very weird, existence for NCAA and especially for the amateur players themselves. And now with the idea of NIL being owned by the players, we get to see Jordan Bohannon do a fireworks commercial. We get to see, my boy Armando Bacot representing Jimmy's Seafood there. So it is a wild world. It is the wild, wild west, but I'm happy that we have more content because of this, because we have more things to talk about. And finally, kids can get paid. And that was, the big conversation for so long. And obviously it was wrong, as Jay Billis reminded us multiple times.
Well, and maybe not so much they can get paid, more students can get paid, and then they can get paid legally, because as you mentioned, students were getting paid, very few were getting caught. And this opens up for people who deserve to get paid. And it's I don't think it's going to change the product, Tate. I really don't.
No. I think if anything, it will make the product even more enjoyable, right? Because we don't feel as there's a tough space that you're in as a college basketball guy, right? I mean, I started when I was 18, working at a radio station, the David Glenn Show. Bomani Jones was there around the same time. Now he's on ESPN. But when I started there, there's like this, you can kind of feel a little dirty as you talk about college basketball or college sports in general, especially when, the coaches are making millions, the TV deals are worth, exorbitant amount of money. You're getting paid. I'm getting paid to talk about it. And these players that we're talking about, again, are not getting any piece of the pie. So the fact that we can take some of that away, obviously not all of it goes away with NIL, but the fact that we can at least feel like, hey, there's there's a fairness that's back in the game. And, yes, we're going to have probably some more ridiculous things happen, but college basketball, to me, that's the beauty of the game. It is ridiculous. And all the characters, all the stories around the sport are ridiculous. And this time it's a good kind of ridiculous, and not ridiculous like, hey, Auburn just paid this guy $250,000, so now he's going to go play there. Because that was not a fun ridiculous. That was a little ridiculous on the wrong side of things.
Yeah, Little Ridiculous is the name of our next podcast, by the way. No, but there's not a lot of parity in college sports.
No.
And this helps a little bit,
I think so.
Yeah. And I think the biggest change people will see will be obviously those commercials, but college video games, Tate. It opens the door for that to come back. Your co-host Titus, did he ever get to play as himself on a video game? He played ball at Ohio State, right?
Yes, he did. He was there 06 to 06, 07 was his freshman year, all the way through the second Final Four with Aaron Kraft. So Titus, yes, he did play as himself, I believe. He unfortunately created the blog Club Trillion while he was in college, and he was not able to profit off his own blog. So he likes to remind people that he was also, persecuted during this whole experience of college sports. So I have to bring that to the forefront too.
My best friend was the starting kicker at Princeton University from 2006 to 2009. And the last college football game, when he would have been on it, they just reused the last year's roster. So it was the different number and different name, all that stuff. So he didn't get to fulfill our childhood dream of, it was a sad day.
That's when you hope that you can update the rosters, right? You hope somebody went online and created it. Shout out to those guys. I always appreciate the guys that would go in, put the full names, and then let us just download it. I did that myself for a few years, but then you just get tired of it,
All right. Well, hey, let's talk about Ben Simmons, because once again, he is trending today. Another report that the Sixers have re-engaged or opened conversations for the first time exploring trading Ben Simmons. 4 teams are mentioned: Cavs, Pacers, Wolves, and Kings. That's a big deal to us. This is a Cavs podcast. Tate, should all the teams be listed in that report, or do you think those teams make sense?
I try to always, whenever there's a report like this, I always try to figure out who's leaking the report, like who wants this information to be out there. And the way that I look at this report is, I think when Rich Paul went to meet with, the Sixers brass, and I'm not going to say who I think this, I assume that Daryl Morey's in the brass, of course. I assume Elton Brand's in the brass, and once that meeting happens, I think Rich Paul alerted them to the fact that Ben Simmons will be looking for a new home, right? And that was not the report that came out of that meeting, but I am reading between the lines there. And then I think that this report is now coming out from the Sixers, because the Sixers have said we cannot salvage this situation with Ben Simmons. So therefore, these are the places, these are the destinations that we will send Ben Simmons. And basically, if you look at the teams and read between the lines, it's for certain guys, certain players. And I don't know if necessarily this would be Ben Simmons' list, right? I think that
right, Cleveland, Indiana, Sacramento,
I think Rich Paul gave a different list to the brass of the Sixers, and I think the Sixers are now putting out their response to what he presented to them. I think the Warriors are on the top of Ben Simmons' list, right? We should just be upfront about that. The Warriors are probably the team, and if you're the Warriors, you're saying, great, we take Ben Simmons, but you cannot get Steph, you cannot get Clay, you can have Andrew Wiggins, you can have Draymond Green, you can have something, the CJ McCollums, right? It does seem like every team is willing to give up their B guy, but not their A guy for Ben Simmons. And Ben Simmons is a supreme talent, right? If Cleveland was able to finesse a deal where they were able to bring Ben Simmons to town, that would be worth it to me. And I don't know what those pieces would look like. I would assume Sexton is involved in that. I would assume.
I got the proposed trade.
Oh, please,
I've talked. Please. All right, it's Sexton, K Love, and next year's first for Simmons, and then you run Garland at 1.
Yeah.
You draft. We'll talk about that after the break. A shooting guard at 2. You have Okoro at 3, Simmons at 4, and Jarrett Allen at 5, and then you got a parade in 2024, baby. Let's go.
Yeah. I mean, I think that would be a major win for Cleveland, to be honest with you. I think if they were able to finagle a deal, like you said, where it's getting rid of a guy who doesn't want to be there in Kevin Love, so that's fine. It's kind of cutting ties with your best player, but a guy who's not going to be a part of your future plans in Colin Sexton, because like you said, we have Garland. I think he's happy to see him on the select team. I think he has all the talent in the world. Isaac Okoro is one of my favorite guys in the league, young guys in the league. Yeah, I get he's in Cleveland, so people don't want to talk about him. And I already made that Auburn joke earlier, so I'm going to give Auburn fans a little bit of love here and just say he is so fun to watch, and you can see him becoming and blossoming into a potential star in this league, a two-way star. Jarrett Allen, should be on the Team USA team. We need a rim protector on that team. I don't know how we already got 2 Cavs on the team.
Can you imagine 3 Cavs on that team? People,
I know. I think people would be shook by that, but I would have taken Al. I mean, if I was building a FIBA roster, I would take Allen over Kevin Love. I know Kevin is there for kind of seniority and things like that. So
that's all the things.
Yeah, the pieces fit though. Like you said, if Ben's at the 4, you have the rim protection on his backside. He doesn't have to worry about that. He can also take some of the playmaking stuff away from Darius Garland and give him a little bit of a break. And he almost gets to be like a LeBron 2.0 in Cleveland.
Yes.
By being able to go there and do that. And obviously Rich Paul knows Cleveland very well. They can navigate the waters there. So as you say that trade, it makes a lot of sense to me. But if I'm the Sixers, I'm doing everything I can to convince Ben Simmons to come back and play for us. And it does seem like he's past the point of that, reading between the lines. But I hope for Cleveland's sake they can pull that off, because that would be huge. Kobe Altman's still the GM, right? Kobe.
Yes. Yeah.
Kobe can pull that off, I think. Kobe's not afraid to go in there and mix it up with Rich Paul.
Nope, he's not. And it's interesting. These rumors happened last year in the playoffs. These aren't new rumors. This isn't like it's just this one series and this was it. This has been brewing so much that last year during COVID, Sam and I did a whole episode about a Ben Simmons trade. That's all we talked about. It wasn't even a thing. We were so excited last year that this could work because we've been in the lottery for, it feels like every year LeBron's not here.
I know.
And Ben Simmons is so intriguing. He is supremely talented. He does have all the ceiling, but it just sometimes doesn't translate in offensive floor. Tate, did you guys see this when he was at LSU? I mean, how have we gotten here? Because teams are hoping to buy low if possible, and then maybe even have a Markelle Fultz situation where he does get a new place and whatever yips or whatever thing is going on is kind of remedied. Did we see this in college with Ben Simmons?
I think if you judge Ben Simmons from LSU, then that's not fair to anybody. It's not fair to Ben. It's not fair to yourself. It's not fair to Johnny Jones. It's not fair to, anybody on that bench, because I think Ben mailed it in when he went there. One thing you can't measure is a man's heart. And I have seen, I'm watching currently in the NBA Finals, a man who cannot shoot the basketball put up 60-point efforts. I mean, they translate to 40-point actual results in Giannis Antetokounmpo, but the energy that he's putting up is 60-point efforts. Like if he can put all the pieces, the man has no footwork yet. He has no real jump shot yet, but he's putting up efforts that, that are greatness, right? And I think Ben Simmons has the talent to do something like that. I seriously do. Now, I cannot measure a man's heart, and I've seen Ben click into that mode and show a lot of heart multiple times. And I've also seen Ben on big stages cower in the moment and have, the mental aspect of the game kind of wear him down a little bit. But I think that new scenery always can be a good thing for people. Ben obviously came in with a lot of expectations. Ben came into a situation where everyone says process. We don't want it to work as far as the powers that be. So I would love to see him get a fresh start. I personally wanted him to play with Australia. I don't know why he decided to back out of that. The only way you get better is to play games. I don't care what anybody says. I mean, you can obviously work on your shots. You can work on your footwork. You can work on your fundamentals. That is important, of course. But to actually get better and to get to that championship level, you need to play basketball. And I wanted Ben to do that. But obviously he decided against that. That's water under the bridge. We're past that point. But I think he needs a change of scenery. I think he and Joel have tried, and they really have tried. I have to give them credit. They have really tried to make it work, but it doesn't work. And Ben in Cleveland, where he's the guy and people love him. That's the thing. Philly fans, I mean, it's a certain type of love. It's we love you when you win. We hate you when you don't. And I think Ben needs to be suffocated with love. That's the best way that I can put it. And Cleveland fans deserve to have a star again, because LeBron James, I love LeBron James, but man, he ripped your hearts out twice, and Ben Simmons would be a nice kind of reprieve for that whole situation.
LeBron bringing the title, I think, changes everyone's.
Yeah. So it had to, in the way that in against a 73 win team. I mean, look, it's going to be something that we all remember. If you watch basketball, you're going to remember that whole run. And There's no way that happens without LeBron James. And that I mentioned Giannis's heart.
Hey, don't forget J.R. Smith back there. I got a fat head, man.
That's my guy also. I love J.R. Smith. North Carolina commit before he went straight to the NBA. But LeBron James's heart in that series for Cleveland, like you cannot measure that, right? And that is what he did in that series. So like I said, you can never say a bad thing about him, but it would be nice if he was able to get a guy signed to his agency to come there and be a star. I think that'd be fun for everybody.
Yep. So you mentioned you hope he goes back to the Sixers. You would like to see that. You don't think it's going to happen. It's look into your crystal ball, Tate. What's going to happen with Ben Simmons? What is the outcome here?
I think based on the teams that the Sixers said they would trade him to, Rich Paul, I mean, I think he's kind of in a what's the best situation for Ben? I think Minnesota might be the team that he actually says is the best because of Anthony Edwards, a very likable player, also a clutch sports guy. So I could see Minnesota for D'Angelo Russell type deal. You know, I don't know who else has to fit in that deal, but D'Angelo Russell is obviously a lead guard and could fit in Philly, and I could see those pieces working. But I also don't see Daryl Morey doing that trade, to be honest with you. I don't think he has enough. I think the trade that the Sixers want is De'Aaron Fox, right? That's why the Kings are on the list. But I don't think there's any way Rich Paul is agreeing to send Ben Simmons to Sacramento because as much as Ben Simmons obviously wants to be in California or New York, you know, I don't see that happening. The other trade that I see is not on their list that I personally want to happen, and Sixers fans probably don't like it, but I love Kyle Lowry for Ben Simmons straight up. I really do. The contracts match. Kyle's on an expiring deal, so you basically get Kyle for 1 year for that $30 million, and then he's done, and then you reevaluate, you know, what that situation looks like. He's a Philly kid, obviously a Villanova guy, and if he went back there, they have an actual point guard. And if they have a lead guard with Joel Embiid's talent, with Tobias Harris that can put him in positions to help him succeed, I think that would be really, really good. It'd be great for Doc Rivers too, a point guard himself and a guy who needs kind of a leader on the court. So Ben Simmons for Kyle Lowry is what I'd want. I think Ben would love Toronto. I really do. And I think Toronto fans would love Ben Simmons. I don't know how him and Siakam would work, but it may work. And so those are kind of that's my full scope of the Ben Simmons world. But what you said about Cleveland, I'm intrigued. I haven't really thought much about Cleveland because I always thought it was Sexton for Ben, and I didn't really see Sexton being a sexy pickup for them. But if it's Kevin Love and Sexton, and like you said, a first-round pick, now I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, we've been thinking about it for a season and a half, Tate. It's all right. We got you, man. Hey, well, you got me thinking with the Raptors. They're in the lottery at 4, which I think Lowry's age, if I'm the Sixers, would concern me. But if they sweeten the pot with that 4th pick, well, hey, let's take a break. We're going to talk about the lottery here in a bit with some prospects and maybe what that looks like. Stick around. Tate Frazier will be right back.
Hey, I'm Jason.
And I'm Gary. And we love ball cards.
And if you love ball cards too, good news. You just found your new favorite podcast. From breaks to grading.
And from collecting to flipping, join us on the Ball Card Show.
The sports podcast for the sports collector.
You've been pining. You've been waiting for Rega and Rhoda to get back together. We got you. Press Play Podcast. We're ready to go. We're going to have our podcast with everything that you want. Browns, Cavaliers, Indians, Ohio State, the national scene. Kenny Rhoda, Michael Regai back together again. Make sure you keep your ears open. It's happening right here on Press Play Podcast. See you then.
For the Dennis Maniloff Show, I'll tap into my 40-plus years of following Cleveland sports and 30-plus years of writing and talking about them, so as to bring you informed opinions and analysis of your favorite players and teams. I also will monitor the national sports scene and, when warranted, step out of the toy department and into the real world. And I'll always be on the lookout for special guests. By all means, join us.
Hey, it's Tito, host of the Premier Fantasy Podcast. Get all the news and analysis you need to dominate your fantasy league. I've been doing this as long as anybody in the business. I can help give you the edge in your leagues. It's the Premier Fantasy Podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hey there, this is Brent Spillin, co-host of a Swingin' a Tribe MLB podcast. Listen, we're just a couple of fans who love to talk everything Cleveland Indians baseball. If you're a fan like us, then this is the podcast for you. Go Tribe.
Hello, Brooks here with the Books with Brooks monthly book club podcast. We read one book a month and then we talk about it. Books like Stephen King's The Shining or Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. If you're on the hunt for book recommendations and enjoy sparkling conversation, come read along with us and then listen in.
Hello, this is Don Mike Mendoza, the host of the Producing While Asian podcast. Join us to listen in on conversations with everyone who identify from producers to non-producers who all are part of the AAPI community. There's all that and more on the Producing While Asian podcast here on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hi, my name is Sam Post, owner of Phenomwell CBD store and PhenomwellCBD.com. That's like phenomenal, CBD.com. Tune in where we talk with experts about how the amazing hemp plant can make a difference for people's health and well-being from the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hey, it's JD from the Hyman Podcast. I created this podcast to have hard conversations that make us human but are also wildly uncomfortable. Conversations that help give voice to the voiceless and to the marginalized. Now you can listen to the entire first season on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Consider this your personal invitation to join the conversation.
All right, back with Tate. Hey, we were talking about Ben Simmons and what that looks like, which led us naturally to talk about the draft. Tate, let's look at a couple prospects. The Cavs are sitting pretty at 3.
Yeah.
The whole world in front of them. We saw last week, they're even the Pistons entertaining maybe a conversation what that looks like. Let's start here. Tate, if you're the Cavs and you're looking at a board, Pistons 1, Rockets 2, you're 3, and Cunningham, Mobley, Green, Suggs, really Cunningham, Mobley, Green, probably the realistic options there. If you are the GM, Tate Frazier of the Cavs, what are you wanting to happen? What would you push for and make moves to do? What are you doing?
Yeah. My first and foremost, Cavs fans, my favorite pick, and obviously I'm a Michael Jordan guy, North Carolina guy. My favorite pick in the draft is number 3. I hate number 1. I despise number 2 because you're basically getting what they didn't want at number 1. Yeah. But I love number 3 because it's kind of like it's a number 1 pick, right? It's really your guy who you think is the best of the rest, so to speak. And a lot of times teams think that guy they get at 3 was their number 1 guy. And if I'm the Cleveland Cavaliers, my number 1 guy on the board, and this is a controversial opinion, but I'm biased towards the bigs. My number 1 pick in this draft is Evan Mobley. And I know that Cade Cunningham is a supreme talent. I love Jalen Suggs. I really do. Suggs would be someone that I am, I'm intrigued by. And Suggs going 3 could be really interesting too, because I mean that would kind of fall into his storyline. But Evan Mobley would be my number 1 pick if I were the Pistons. I don't think I take him because I have Isaiah Stewart. I have a front court, so I understand they're going to go for a guard. And Cade Cunningham is kind of perfect for them when you talk about getting a star straight to Detroit. So let that happen. I think at 2, you hope that Green goes, Jalen Green. I like Jalen Green. I mean, I'm a college basketball guy, so I didn't watch him as much. I will say I didn't watch the Ignite team as much. But let him go to the Rockets. That's fine by us. And then 3, we take Evan Mobley. We have the best big in the draft. We have seen in these playoffs that having DeAndre Ayton on the floor is huge. It leads you to potentially a championship having a guy like that. Nikola Jokic is the MVP. Joel Embiid can't be stopped. Giannis Antetokounmpo is playing the 5. So we need a 5-man, right? We need a legit big if we're going to actually contend. I love Jared Allen. As I said, I would have put him on the FIBA team. But if you get Evan Mobley, you get him to learn under Jared Allen, and now you have a trade piece in Allen. I could see that being a good fit for Cleveland, where we have an actual franchise changing type player. But in my basketball mind, I would love to see Evan Mobley go to Houston because you have Akeem Olajuwon, you have Ralph Sampson. It just makes sense that a big go to Houston. You know what I mean? So for Cleveland, though, I think fingers crossed that you get either Jalen Suggs or Evan Mobley.
So Tate Frazier, GM of Cavs, is hoping. Are you trading up? Do you believe in Mobley enough?
I do not believe in trading up. No, I let unless they say, hey, unless you hear and you love Mobley and you're like, he's going to go 1, I would trade up for Mobley, but I would not trade up for a guard. I mean, we've already seen that happen, right? We saw it happen with the Sixers when they trade up for Markelle Fultz, and then Tatum is right there, and the Boston Celtics fans get to say they fleeced you, and then they put a lot of pressure on your number 1 pick. You just stay away from that and let Detroit have the pressure of having the number 1 pick. So I'd say stay where you are. 3 is always better. That's how I feel.
Does trading down with the Magic to get 5 and 8, does that interest you?
That
you have
intrigues
Jonathan Kuminga there at 5. I mean, does that tickle your fancy there, man?
Yeah, that intrigues me, but I don't really like that window in the draft. I especially don't like who's projected to go there. I love Davion Mitchell, but I thought Davion is 16 Terry Rozier where he should be in reality, but now he's up as high as 7. And I think it's because we don't really know who's going to be the guy. Scotty Barnes, right, from Florida State. I'm intrigued by Scotty Barnes, but if I could get Evan Mobley at 3, then I would take Evan Mobley over Kuminga and Scotty Barnes, or something like that. Whatever that little duo is, the Keon Johnson, I find him fascinating, but I would rather have Evan Mobley. I'd rather have Jalen Suggs. So I think top 3 is really the 3, and maybe Green's in there, so maybe it's 4. But once you get to 5, it's like that's where the drop off is for me, right after those 4.
So it sounds like Mobley is 1 on your big board, or
Mobley's 1 on my big board, and then number 2 is Cade Cunningham, and number 3 is Jalen Suggs. So like on my big board, if I'm the Cavs, I am happy because I'm saying to myself, man, I wish we could have got Mobley, but it's okay because we have Allen, and we're gonna get a legit guard. We're gonna get Jalen Suggs here, and we're gonna have a real point guard.
Dude, I love Jalen Suggs, and can you imagine the mayhem in Cleveland if we don't move Sexton and we have Garland and then we draft Jalen Suggs?
I love it. I mean, what's the problem? We have a ton of great guards, and now people are looking at Cleveland like, hey, man, we want to steal one of those guards from Cleveland. And I think it puts Sexton in a position where he's probably, going to go out there and play really hard to make people know his value so he can get himself traded like Terry Rozier did with the Celtics. You know what I mean? And that might be fun.
Tate, do you believe in player comps, like saying this player is like this player?
I laugh at them, right? I mean, I think that the rise of the NBA draft guide is high comedy to me because one, every player is unique at some level, right? I mean, there's no Giannis Antetokounmpo, there is no Shaq, there is only one Kobe, there's only one Jordan, there's only one LeBron. I mean, we can say they have shades of, that's our favorite term, but people say shades of a certain player, and of course. Right. Devin Booker has shades of Kobe Bryant, but he is not Kobe Bryant. Right. He is Devin Booker.
Poor man's whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. I like shades of, but
yes,
I can't really, I've tried to think of comps of guys. I can somewhat piece them together a lot of the time, but I don't like to box guys in either because, if you ask me Duncan Robinson's comp, I probably would have said some ridiculous people, and now he's playing in the NBA finals. So,
Right. Yeah. So I think that's helpful for people who don't follow college basketball.
Yeah.
And last year I said Okoro is like, I said on the night that we drafted him, I was like, he reminds me of a Kawhi Leonard, just raw kind of guy out of college, but just at you on get after you on defense. People laughed. And then a week later we saw it on ESPN and I was like, ha! Absolutely. So Tate, I know you don't like to, but maybe these first 4 guys, if we could talk about just shades of players, Cade Cunningham is a shade of who? Who would you say he's a shade of?
Whew, man, I honestly like that. Cade is an interesting because Cade is listed at 6'8", right? Mm-hmm. But I think he's like 6'6", 6'7". So I mean he's a big guard. So I mean I honestly don't even really have an answer for Cade Cunningham, to be honest with you. When I think about who would be his player comp, because he's so. I love his competitiveness. I love his heart. I don't necessarily love his game all the time, if that makes any sense. It's hard to explain. Like Cade has he's very uniquely himself, and I could see him being able to control a game. He has great mentors around him. He has Larry Brown working with him, which I love Coach Brown, and I think that Texas, kind of Arlington area that he's from. There's a bunch of good basketball minds around him. So he'll figure it out, but do you have one? Yeah, I would love to hear it. I feel like you have some comps. So I would love, maybe I can bridge off your comps and then go from there.
Gosh. Well, I think as a big guard, a playmaker, Magic Johnson, but not really that type
Yeah,
of.
that's the one we hear, but like there's no other Magic, and Cade's not
Yeah.
really like Magic because he's not the showman that Magic was, but he also he's not like gonna lead the break, I mean, he can obviously. I don't know, you know what I mean? There are shades of Magic Johnson for sure, but I don't see him being that type of guy. I don't know how to explain it any other way.
Which should excite Detroit. I mean, they had a great draft last year, which, you know, they have a really great core, and we'll see what happens. It does seem like Cade only has one visit. He's only like taking one team, and so he's pretty confident he's going to go to Detroit. That seems to be the national discourse. And we'll see. Evan Mobley.
Yeah, Troy Weaver, the GM of Detroit, Troy Weaver is not letting Cade Cunningham go anywhere else. I mean, he will. I think he would trade Cade Cunningham for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and maybe Shai is
that's a great
for him, to be honest with you,
Mm-hmm.
Because they're both big guards.
Yeah,
but that's the only player I could see. Like if OKC called and said, "Hey, we want Cade Cunningham because we're going to kind of push our rebuild back even more years. We'll give you Shai." I think the Pistons do that in a heartbeat because they already have guys that are ready. Like Sadiq Bey is ready. He's on the select team. Isaiah Stewart's ready.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy Grant's an all-star. So like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander kind of fits that group more than Cade does. So maybe that's the move.
It's crazy to say Cade has a higher ceiling than Shai. And Shai is, any team would love to have Shai on their. It's nuts to try to quantify this.
Exactly. And I think Troy Weaver, and I think the Pistons are ahead of schedule. So maybe Cade isn't the answer right now, which is surprising because if you said that, 10 months ago, you would say the Pistons better take him. You know what I mean? But they actually have had guys develop quicker than you would. It's inspiring for the Cavs, right? I mean, if you're the Cavs, you're saying, hey,
you would hope.
I think so. I really think so.
Yeah. So we'll just do a couple more here and then we'll bounce. Evan Mobley, big, you said it's poetic. It fits in Houston. Who does he remind you of? What shades of who?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people say Chris Bosh, and I don't really see that. So I would say not Chris Bosh.
I don't think he has the range that Bosh has.
No, he's not a jump shooter. I think that he's a legit big on the inside. I think, it's Christian Wood is a guy, right, that's playing in Houston that might be a good mentor for him. I in my mind think of Evan Mobley as going number 2 to the Rockets, so I would love to see him go play with Christian Wood and have those two bigs there, and maybe he learns some things, doesn't have to necessarily be the guy from day one, but he's a legit big that you want to have in this NBA, this modern NBA, that I think eventually his game will stretch out. He can be great in screen and roll. I think Evan Mobley can, and I think he can be great defensively from the jump pretty much. So I would say Christian Wood is not only a good teammate match with him, but maybe a good comp for him as well. Maybe
a more offensively minded Looney. I don't know.
Man, I hope for his sake he's a lot better than Looney. But I really believe in Evan Mobley for some odd reason. And a lot of people, I think the one game that they watched of his was the last game in the NCAA tournament. And they say, I don't really see it from this guy. But I saw some dominance from him at times. And that gave me a lot of hope. And I like the way that the game in the playoffs has reverted back to basketball. I understand because I watched the NBA in the regular season. And it doesn't make sense to me half the time. It really doesn't. I've never seen people just give people shots. I've never seen it. I mean, I guess that's like it's part of the show of it all. But it's why we're losing in the FIBA game because the FIBA game is physical. Seriously, I mean, and that's
Beal and Tatum staring down refs because they're not getting whatever, and they're.
Tatum is they have to bench Tatum. I'm not even he didn't play in the Argentina game and we're so much better because Jeremy Grant's playing and Jeremy Grant plays defense. I mean, you got to play defense and you got to be physical. Kyle Lowry should have been on that team. You know what I mean? Like they need a physical point guard to set the tone, a big point guard. Like they're not, I mean, obviously big in body size, not big in height when I'm talking about Kyle, but
big in thickness and girth.
Thick what you like.
All right, let's do Jalen Suggs, which real quick, how great was that tournament for college basketball? My goodness, it couldn't have come at a better time. The sport I felt like was just not on anyone's mind at the lowest I remember it's ever being, and then that tournament just was incredible, and Jalen Suggs might have been the biggest winner of the tournament. Absolutely.
I mean, that shot is, that is a all-time I'm going to remember that shot moment. You know what I mean? And it's not like Chris Jenkins, because Chris Jenkins, obviously, that was a moment that was like of a team and a set play and kind of like this culmination of Jay Wright. Like, of course, he's a good coach. Look how prepared his team is for this moment. But Chris wasn't going to go be a star. Like, Jalen Suggs is going to be a star.
Yes.
And that was a star play.
Yeah.
And obviously Monday night did not go as they planned, but I don't blame Suggs for that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at him and I see, I mean, we're talking like a true guard that could be a real star in this league. I mean, there's plenty of examples that I could give. I mean, you hope that he has a longevity, but I mean, he could immediately be like a Darren Williams type. I mean, he could be like a Brandon Roy. He could be like a Jamal Murray. He could be you could move him off the ball and make him more into like a combo 2 guard if you had to, if you already had a point guard. But he's 6'4", 6'5", legit. He's got heart. I said you can't measure heart. I can see that he has it, and he's not afraid of the moment. So I mean, to me, there's a lot of good when you have Jalen Suggs.
Yeah, I know this is high praise, but just shades of Dwayne Wade and how he's able to, like, that just reminded me so much of that Marquette run. In 2005, I think that was 5, I think, 4. I don't remember.
2004.
But just so much of, like, when he took over that tournament the way he did, it just very reminded me so much of Dwayne Wade in Marquette. So, and I know he's a little different position, but I know I love Suggs. I thought the tournament is a time where people really, it's like, hey, this is I'm a baller and I'm going to show the world and I'm not going to let my team lose. And I loved it. And I love Suggs. I think whatever team gets him, I think if he does fall to 4 to the Raptors, it's just like to replace Lowry. It's just so perfect there. I don't know. I'm a big fan of Suggs as well. I love his game, love everything about it. And
I think he would be great in Cleveland. I mean, if Cleveland got Jalen Suggs, I think they should really celebrate that. Like, we got a star. If you get Mobley, it's not going to be sexy, but you still got a star. I think you got a foundational piece. But if you get Suggs, you can do the Nike billboard, you know what I mean, in a few years, where it's Jalen Suggs and this is his town, and he can go full Ja Morant, where he takes over, like what Ja did with Memphis, where he can come in and everyone on the team. But that's our guard, like that's our lead guard, and I'm going to ride with him and I'm going to follow him. And I think you guys need that.
And I think what we saw in the tournament was Suggs was the best player on the court.
Yeah.
And so many times in basketball, it comes down to who's the best player on the court.
Giannis Antetokounmpo right now.
Yes. And the Cavs haven't been able to say that since LeBron. Sexton, he has flashes, but he's not normally the best player on the court. And honestly, the Cavs probably don't have the top 2 players best on the court. We don't know what Garland's going to become. Allen is great. Still trying to figure that out, it seems, but Suggs, he is the billboard. I think is more better known than Cade Cunningham, to be honest.
I do too. And I think that I think the reason why the Pistons are floating the idea of a trade is because they internally think that Suggs is better than Cade.
Oh man.
I seriously think that. And it goes back to what I told you before, which is like 3 might be better than 1 in this case, because if you guys end up with Suggs, because they have to, just by the pressure of it all, have to take Cade, then you may win in that sense. So don't make the trade. That's if Detroit is calling, then they don't like Cade. And that to me.
Yeah. If one is calling down, that should be like red flags in itself. Like, well, hey, wait a second. Like, why aren't you in love with Cade? So Suggs is there at 3. You just get him and figure it out, or you think that means Sexton is on the move?
No, I mean, I think you have all 3 of them there, and then Sexton, I wouldn't let teams dictate when I trade Colin Sexton. I just think we have a bevy of guards, and we have probably Jalen running our second unit at that point. Maybe we start
no pressure
Garland together, and then we have Suggs run the second unit, and then slowly as we get to January, Colin Sexton and everyone in the world knows that he is on the block, and we are trying to find some sort of piece to bring in that makes sense, some sort of veteran perhaps, or maybe like a Michael Porter Jr. or like I don't even know who you're trying to look for in that sense. But
so I would just all of the Minnesota Timberwolves, like, oh, remember when they drafted all those guards and then they missed out on Curry because they had too many guards. And I just would feel like, I don't know. I'm torn because I love Suggs and I don't know what we have in Green. I
don't take Jalen Green at 3. I think Jalen Green is great at 4 because I think it's those 3. Then it's Jalen Green. Then there's the drop off, and then you could argue with me Keon Johnson. You could argue with me Scotty Barnes. You could argue with me Kuminga. I actually like Kuminga more than Green, but I just think Green has more quote unquote upside, right? So I think at 4 you would take him there, especially if you're the Raptors. So, but I think Green over Suggs would be egregious. I really do. I think that would be bad business for everybody.
A lot of people very high on Green.
I don't honestly, like I said, the experts, the draft picks or whatever. I do not.
Yeah. We talk about shades of last, I think it was a couple episodes ago. We had a Cleveland radio personality on our show. He's on our network, Kenny Rhoda. He said shades of Kobe, just that he's able to kind of create his shot and how he carries himself. And
he's talking about Jalen Green.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
so
Jalen Green might be like Zach LaVine. I don't think he's. I can't measure a man's heart, as I said before. But the Kobe Bryant, we could see what Kobe was going to be.
Right.
So
So
I hope Jalen Green could be that, but I don't see it. No.
I haven't watched a lot of Jalen Green either. I heard that. I was like, well, man, do I need to rethink Jalen Green? Like, what the heck? People just don't throw that out there. Like, I don't know. So either way, the Cavs need to figure some things out because they're going to have a choice to make here in the next couple of weeks, Tate. And we'll see what happens, man. I don't know. I'm really excited.
So is the idea that Jalen Green plays the 2, I guess?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
I guess that makes sense, but
more of a pure 2 than what we have. And it would clear up Garland's role. And then we would be able to move on. They're ready to move on from Sexton, which is a shame. I saw a stat, side by side with CJ McCollum, and they're almost identically the same. And it's hard to think that way because our team's been so bad and he's had to do so much, but he plays so I
would love Suggs and Sexton as a backcourt. I think that's scary. I think if you're the other team, you're a little intimidated by the fact that you have 2 guys that are willing to pick you up 94 feet.
Yeah.
Legit. That's not fun for anybody if you have to go play Cleveland.
And then Okoro and Allen. Oh, now you're talking into it.
Now you got these guys on the back end. I mean, they'll
swat everything.
That to me, I mean, I'm sure Jalen Green fits in a more, like, if we're just doing this on paper, we're saying he's a 6'4", 6'5". He looks like he could be Bradley Beal or one of these other two guard stars in the league. But I would if I was the GM, there's no way I would do that. No.
Well,
I could not do that in good faith. But Jalen Suggs on the board, I've seen too much.
Yeah. Yep.
And maybe this is Jalen Green. I know he argued this. He was like, I should have played college basketball. And I am a college basketball number 1 guy. So I've obviously been blinded by the Jalen Suggs light, but I don't know how you pass on him.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Tate, what are you guys doing for the draft? Anything special?
We are going to have, the draft experts on. We're going to have Duncan Robinson, who was a friend of the program that became an NBA superstar overnight. He's going to be on the show coming up this week on Thursday. That'll be fun. And then next week, we're going to have the Kevin O'Connors of the world, some of those draft experts like I was talking about, to give us the shades of breakdown.
Yes.
We're going to be at Summer League in August. Titus and I will be there. I will also be there with BJ Armstrong, who I do another podcast with, Pushing Through. So I will be in Summer League for that whole week, trying to see what these guys look like in person, because that's the most fun for me. I love to see guys in that transition because, as I said at the top of the show, FIBA is different than college. College is different than NBA. So it's hard to project guys, but Summer League does that.
And because of the extended playoffs, the NBA never really sleeps now because we got draft and then it's right into Summer League, and it's pretty great, man. Basketball all the time, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, they were trying to be a 12-month sport. My old boss, Bill Simmons, always made that joke, and I always
heard of
laughed at him. Yeah, exactly. I always laughed at him, and I was like, "There's no way that'll ever be that." But I do think the NBA has gotten there in some sense, especially with the coverage that they've been able to drum up. But I'm excited for college basketball, man. Johnny Juzang coming back, Villanova, kind of getting all the cards set for them to make a run. Kansas, I think, is the number one team in the country. I think that they have literally depth. They're too deep at every position. They might be able to do a platoon 2015 type Kentucky deal. Kentucky, speaking of, they're going to be great. North Carolina, my alma mater, they have gotten a lot of guys in the transfer. I mean, that's the thing. Free agency now exists in college basketball, so it is a lot of fun. You mentioned the game, won't look much different. I don't think it'll look much different in a bad way. I think it could look much different in a good way, where we have guys building their brands, we have teams that have identities again, and we have players and coaches that are happy. And they don't, feel like one side's getting slighted. So that'll be fun.
Well, another good thing going for college basketball is students in the stands. There's nothing like college basketball on ESPN, man. Just seeing everyone jumping, and it's going to be great. Tate, you've been great. Thank you so much for coming on the show, man. Really appreciate it. Yeah,
of course. Go Cavs. I hope you guys get Jalen Suggs or Evan Mobley. Just
have you ever talked about the Cavs this much before?
Honestly, I've always been intrigued by the Cavs, because DeJuan Wagner was one of my favorite players. That was like when DeJuan Wagner got picked, I was like, man, I bought his jersey. I was like, I was 1 year ahead of the plan, right? So I think that, Colin Sexton, if he wants to, here's your shades of Colin Sexton might be DeJuan Wagner, and you might be bringing in your next LeBron James, which is Jalen Suggs. So that could be. Could be nice. I'm
going to go take a cold shower. Tate, thank you so much, man. That does it for this episode of Caps on the Break NBA podcast. Thank you so much for downloading and listening. Shouts to the Press Play Podcast Network for making this possible. Shouts to Tate Frazier. Tate, you're the man. Thanks for everything. And we'll catch you guys draft night. We're trying to do a live Zoom, get you guys going, get some guys on the network on the show. It's going to be fun. Mike Breen, take us out.
Congratulations, Cleveland. Your decades-long wait is finally over. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.